I want to talk with you about the oxygen. It's come up several times throughout the presentation today, and a little bit of history here. Many years ago, in fact, when I first joined the company 20 plus years ago, my grandfather was engaging in quite a bit of research on oxygen in the skin. Right? He was doing a clinical test for the efficacy and the penetration of oxygen for an oxygen device. And he shared with me his frustration that not only did these devices not increase oxygen penetration, but it really wasn't going anywhere on the skin. And these are devices that are costing thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. So he invested in what was called an oxygen electrode, right? So you can measure the amount of oxygen that's penetrating into the skin. And I remember distinctly, before we even launched the treatment, him saying, I've got to find a good way to get oxygen in the skin because I know it's beneficial. I know that it helps to control bacterial content. I know that it helps with vasoconstriction, but there's no good ways of getting oxygen to the skin. A couple months later, I remember the staff esthetician that we had there at the time, one esthetician, one. Now we have an army. An army. This was his dream, by the way. I'll talk a little bit more about that before the end of the day. Don't want to get choked up while I'm in the middle of my oxygen wrap here. He came to me a couple months later and he said, you know what, I found it. I found a way that we can actually get oxygen into the skin. And I said, well, what's the challenge? And he said, well, the oxygen is a barrier. It's designed to keep what's inside the skin in and what's outside the skin out. So you have to have methods for getting these actives to penetrate into the skin. Oxygen being a gas, it makes it even harder, right? To get oxygen to the level in the skin where it's actually going to absorb and affect any kind of change was extremely challenging. And when he started looking initially at hydrogen peroxide. But he said, you know what, hydrogen peroxide is not going to be the answer. It's not the solution because the hydrogen peroxide is actually a free radical donator, right? It actually is what's called a reactive oxygen species. It's part of this family, and it metabolizes very quickly to something called the hydroxyl radical. But during the research looking at hydrogen peroxide, he found something called magnesium peroxide. And magnesium peroxide is a powder, right? It's a solid state. And when it's solubilized inside a gel base and applied to the skin, we can use a series of steps to be able to convert that mixture to oxygen and water. And I remember clear as day when we started testing the formulations, how quickly we were starting to see results in some of the clients that were coming back to us, some of the subjects of this study. And we were all blown away. So we knew we had something really, really special. So we introduced it into the market and we started using it for acne pretty much exclusively. Well, then we started looking at rosacea because again, we know that bacterial content with rosacea is high as well. Then we started looking at the fact that what we were using not only to create the oxygen, but to neutralize it, right? You've got to neutralize oxygen because it's also a free radical. It's actually a diradical, right? Too much oxygen can have a negative impact. But finding that delicate balance of the benefit and then helping to counterbalance some of the negative impact once we have too much exposure was brilliantly put together in this system. So solubilizing the powder into the gel base and creating the oxygen became the goal. And once he finally landed on it, when he finally solved the equation, the results were absolutely incredible. So what we have here again is a system that has been often imitated, never duplicated, and it's a kit. Right, we have everything that you need for the most part that include in the kit. I will tell you, however, that it's best to exfoliate, a mild exfoliation before the oxygen treatment. And I know that some of our team are going to be sharing, again, some of the mixology tips when we break for our final panel before the end of the day. Now, when we look again at the mixing, it's the powder that mixes with the gel base. And as soon as we get that onto the skin, a lot of clients will already begin to start to feel that activity. But it's not until we apply step number 2, which is an enzyme spray that actually converts that material to oxygen and water on the surface of the skin. So we're actually creating oxygen, and it's called generation in situ. It really is the only effective method for getting oxygen into the skin safely, right? The pressurized gas, the O2 wands, honestly, I know some of you have invested in them, but they just don't work, right? They don't get into the skin, and you can't measure how much is there once it's functioning, right? So the system that we have here, absolutely fantastic, incredible, very effective again for the bacterial content associated with acne, also helps to saponify the sebum. And I've mentioned several times that there was a time where I used to do all the demonstrations, right? I was going out, educating, training accounts, back when we didn't have very many. but I was also doing the demos at trade shows and in education classes. And there was a class, we had almost 100 people. And I never forget doing a demonstration. I selected the model. She raised her hand as being a model. I could see that there was, some pre-existing acne there, but it wasn't until I actually got her makeup off before I could really take a look and see what we were dealing with. And she was absolutely loaded with microcomedones all the way across the zygoma, across the nose. And I thought, okay, this is gonna be really good. She's a perfect client. So we did the cocoa enzyme, a relatively standard treatment for addressing acne, and removed the enzyme, and I could just feel the texture on my fingertips. Right, on the surface of the skin, that these are ready to be extracted. So I proceeded with the oxygen treatment, right? Step 1, mixed it up. I could feel them getting a little bit looser. But by the end of step 3, which by the way, step 3, primarily a sodium bicarb base. And if you know about the chemistry of sodium bicarb, it helps to saponify or liquefy the sebum, right? So I'm ready to do the extractions just before that final step. And I just took my fingertips and a little bit of pressure on either side of the face, and boom, boom. Dozens of these microcomedones popped right out, like stood up like trees in a forest. And everyone went, oh my gosh. And then we sold every single oxygen kit that we had in the room. I'm hoping to have the same effect here without showing the demonstration. So what was actually happening there? So when we used the sodium bicarb solution along with some other things that are there, it stops the oxygen activity. Again, we only want a measured amount, anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes. And depending on how many times we've done the treatment, how well the skin tolerates the oxygen treatment, we can actually push that. The longer that step is on the skin, the more vasoconstricting you'll actually see, to the degree where it actually can blanch the skin. Not blanching like we see with TCA peels, but it'll actually make the skin completely white. You get that on a client's skin that has rosacea, they're gonna love that, right? They absolutely love that. It calms that redness and slows that redness with both those conditions, acne and rosacea. So again, I performed a little bit of the finishing extractions and then finished with step number 4. Now, step number 4, actually because of the content of the sodium bicarb spray, step 3 actually brings the pH up significantly. Step number 4 brings the pH back down to exactly where it's supposed to be, right? How many of you are working with the oxygen currently? Show of hands. Okay, I know those of you that have been working with us for a long time, you're probably using the cocoa enzyme, right? That's a standard protocol. Has anybody opted to deviate from that and start using, for example, the charcoal milk clarifying mask? We've done a lot of promotions with the C2O2 because again, we've got a great system there, lactic and lactobionic for exfoliation. Keep in mind, again, when you exfoliate the skin first, you're basically, particularly with the enzymes, you're denaturing the protein around the comedone, right? So what's helping to secure those microcomedones is the protein content at the surface of the skin. So the enzymes and even the charcoal milk, it's gonna help to dissolve that. By liquefying the sodium bicarb with the sebum underneath with the sodium bicarb, right, now you have nothing anchoring it from the bottom. So you've got basically a microcomedone that's just kind of like floating around there in the follicle. It's just begging to be plucked. So sometimes you don't even have, as I mentioned, have to do the extraction, just a little bit of pressure. If you're trying to find something that's effective for extraction, look no further. This is gonna be it. You will not find anything as good as the oxygen treatment with the appropriate exfoliator to make sure you get rid of some of that congestion. And that's what a lot of your clients need. It's a lot of your clients are looking for. Now, I will say also there are some aging benefits. Again, oxygen is something that we need for collagen production within the fibroblast cell, oxygen. We talked a little bit about copper, glucose, all these things are necessary, but we don't get nearly as much oxygen as we need topically as we do from respiratory. So when we start to partner this in particular with the firming peptide, now we've got a real anti-aging treatment, right? Something that's gonna help to reverse visible signs of aging and increase skin health overall. Anybody using that combo? I find that a lot of people are using it, not as many as are using it for acne treatment, but those that are really engaging that system are getting fantastic results. So again, keep in mind, you do the oxygen treatment first. It's a vasoconstrictor, but it's helping with the bacteria. And then you do the firming peptide, which helps with circulation and blood flow. Right? All the things, there we go, all the things. Okay, any questions on the oxygen? Again, I've been talking about it for so long, so many times, I almost kind of forget, like everyone should know how incredibly beneficial it is. But so many of you are new to not just the brand, but also to some of the treatment protocols that we have. So again, if you're looking for results there, this is your treatment.